Hello, my friends. It's Maria from StashBlaster Quilts. Welcome to the channel. I was not here 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was, on the last date that we normally meet. We meet the first and third Wednesday of the month. I was in Chicago, and I'll tell you all about that a little bit later. If this is your first time here, welcome. I always start these with a tip because in my day job, I am a professional organizer. And people have told me that these little tips come in handy. So I had a client I was working with this month who is not overly cluttered. So this is not one of my hoarding type jobs. There was something about this one particular room in her home, and it was a living room. And it just bothered her, and she didn't know exactly what the problem was with how her things were laid out and the clutter that she had, which was minimal. So since she was stuck, I made a suggestion, and I'd like to suggest this to you as well. We as people in our evolutionary arc learned that we can't pay attention to every single thing that we see and survive. It's a survival tactic that items that you see on a regular basis become invisible. Now, some people call it clutter blindness in my industry, but what that basically means is if you were a cave person walking out of your cave and you actually paid attention to every blade of grass you saw along the way, you wouldn't see the tiger hiding behind it. We are hardwired to notice things that are different. Well, there was something bothering her, and she didn't know what it was. So what I recommended was that she take a picture of it and then go and look at it somewhere else. So either in another room, or if she went out for coffee, or if she was waiting for her kid to be picked up at school, whatever it was, someplace different. And look at the picture then. The reason for that is when you're not in that environment, and you're looking at it in a different medium, because now you're looking at it in 2 dimensions instead of in 3, it will force your brain to start noticing these things. So she looked at it and called me up and she said, I figured out what it was. In one corner of her room, her photos and things on the wall were asymmetrical, and one side went in a little bit. It isn't a big deal, okay? We're not talking about major life-changing problem here. But by looking at it in the photographs, she realized why it bothered her. Now, I say to people all the time, nobody should live in a model home level of clutter unless that's how they're actually comfortable, not just how they think they're supposed to live. In her particular case, it was bothering her, and she couldn't pinpoint what it was. So, for me, I wouldn't really care if my photos weren't exactly even, but it did to her, and which meant it needs to be addressed. So we went in, we took all of her photographs and paintings and things down. We came up with a new arrangement, because while we were doing it, we might as well put things up a little bit differently. And we set her up with a very symmetrical look. And to her, that was enough that she could release the tension. She understood what was wrong, and it got fixed. Her shoulders came down, her spine lengthened, she was much more comfortable. So if you are looking at an area of your home that's a little cluttered or not, but there's something that's not right, try the photograph method. It can make a huge amount of difference. Now, you might look at it and still say, yeah, I know there's still something here and I don't know what it is. You can always run it by a friend and see if they can figure it out. But just taking that different perspective can make a huge difference. So that's our tip for this version. So when I was on my trip to Chicago, it was lovely. I got to see people I haven't been able to see since 2019. And I was an attendee for a change. I didn't have to prep the presentation and make sure they had the presentation and the handouts in advance and carry along all of my other stuff just in case stuff blew up, because that's what happens. So, for example, when I speech, when I give a speech, I always carry not only a thumb drive that has the presentation on it, even if I've sent them the presentation in advance, I bring my laptop onto which I've already loaded the presentation in case the thumb drive doesn't work. It's kind of like me with taxes. I'm a belt, suspenders, and if necessary, staples kind of gal. So I like to make sure that if I'm going somewhere to speak, that I am as prepared as possible with backups. I didn't have to do any of that this time. It was wonderful. I didn't have to worry about bringing, specific clothes. I wear this lavalier, which you can see right here, because I talk with my hands. You've noticed that. Even if this is your first time, you've seen me talking with my hands. Holding a mic, it gets exhausting, especially some of those older mics are pretty heavy. So I prefer to use the lavalier when I can. There are some pieces of clothing you can wear it in, and some that you can't. Now, here, I don't really care. I'll plop it onto whatever shirt that I'm wearing that day. As long as it's not up to here, the lavalier will work. And even if it is up to here, I'll just make a fold and clip it on. They're my clothes. I'm here in my studio. I don't care. But if I'm standing in front of a bunch of people and I'm professionally dressed and I want to be able to take my jacket off, I have to be able to have it set up so I can easily transfer from jacket to shirt, take off the jacket, and not lose the pack. In this particular case, just before I got on actually, this slid out of the clip. So this was still on my pants, but this was now dangling down. Whoops. So I need to have clothes that I can easily use this on and, add a sweater, take off a sweater or whatever and not be truly disruptive, because it's usually while I'm talking that I'm either getting hot or I need to do something where I need to be able to raise my hands up high, and I can't really do that in a jacket because I get bound up. So it's that kind of thing you have to think about when you're presenting. So I didn't have to think about any of that. I could just pick the shirts I wanted to wear, and I had slacks that were comfortable, and I didn't care if they pooched out a little bit in the back or whatever it needed to do, because I was just there as an attendee. So it was wonderful. So it was in Chicago, and I took my husband with me, and so I got to hang out with him, which was nice, and some other people who had their husbands there. I learned a lot. This was the ICD, the Institute for Challenging Disorganizations International Conference. And it was kind of neat. We had people from 6 different countries there. Let me think. It's been a couple weeks now, so I may not have them all. We had Mexico, Canada. Those ones were easy. The Netherlands, Colombia. I think we had Brazil, and then of course the U.S. But there are several professional organizing associations all over the world. The Japanese didn't make it this year. They used to make it every year, but I don't know what happened this year. It could be a COVID thing. It could be just a expense thing. Who knows these days? So I kind of missed seeing them, but it was really, really good. And what I really like about the ICD convention is that it's set very differently than most conventions. So 3 weeks before, I spoke at the Crisis Intervention Teams meeting, and I told you guys about that. And they had, I think, 14 tracks running at the same time. So there's 14 different presentations, and you have to pick the one you want to see. And it never fails that there'll be sessions where there's nothing I'm interested in, and then there's one time frame where there's 3 things I'm interested in. So, or I'm speaking, and so I can't see something else that I'm interested in. What I really like about the ICD conference is that there's one track. It's one speaker for everyone all the time. So you don't miss anything, which is really, really nice. There are some people who have said, well, if I'm not interested in that topic, then there's nothing for me to go and see. Well, that's kind of true. But if you want to, you can hit the pool then, as far as I'm concerned. But it does mean that if you're interested in the topics, you can get in. When I was speaking at CIT, the room was so full that people would either open the door and then leave, or there was at one point like a bunch of people in the hallway trying to listen, and then they'd like lean in with their phones and try to snap pictures of the slides. That's not good for anybody. So I really like, there's plenty of room for everyone. You can just sit and relax. You're not trying to run all over the building and get from this room over here to that room over there. Life is just so much easier. So I really, really enjoyed that conference. I've always enjoyed it, but it was such a nice change because lately I've been doing a lot of those big multi-track conferences. So I enjoyed that. And then one night we decided to go out to dinner with a whole bunch of us. And Carrie was another one of the organizers. The ICD is for professional organizers, but it's kind of like the next step up in terms of how in-depth the education is. So I was there with Carrie. She had just gotten this major award, or she was going to be getting it. And so there were a whole bunch of us that went. And so, given my luck, and you know how things go, right, guys? We were walking down the street, and there was this really high manhole. And Scott and I were holding hands. The other people were laughing at us about that, but that's just too bad. We've been married 30 years. If we want to hold hands, we're going to hold hands. And then I said, oops, wait a second. And I was being extremely careful going over the manhole cover. And I said, with my luck, I would trip and fall and pull Scott down right with me. Before we got to the other end of the street, Scott tripped. He didn't pull me down on top of him, but he did wrench my shoulder and hand as he fell and landed up against a building. So he got hurt. Not badly, but he was a little stiff. And we went to dinner at a place called the Safe House, which is your secret agent. And you have to have the code word, which they don't tell you. So then there's all these tests you have to do. My particular group, because they only let in like up to 5 at a time, had to do the conga. And then there was another group later that had to hop like frogs. And everybody who's in the restaurant can see the people who are trying to get in on a screen. So you are doing this for everyone. You just don't know it at the time if it's your first time. So we did the conga and we got to go in. And so we had this wonderful dinner. It was pricey, but that was okay. There's a scavenger hunt that you can do. So for example, if you push one button, one of the bar stools that somebody may be sitting on will just slowly lower. So next thing they know, the counter's here. There's lights that turn on. There's all kinds of stuff. And then, we had fun doing that along with eating our meal. At the end, one of our compatriots, his meal was definitely not what he wanted. And so they they gave the table a dessert. It was this giant margarita style glass. It's like a cone on the top and then flat. But it was like this tall. And they had sparklers in there, so it was like shooting fireworks all over the place when they're bringing it through. A bunch of ice cream in the bottom, whipped cream, nuts, cherries, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out at the end, what they did is they actually split the cost of the thing amongst all of the checks, which was definitely not fair and wasn't particularly nice. But when you leave, you have to go through a laser maze and all this kind of stuff and try to find your way out, which was fairly easy to do, so we did that, and it was fun. Well, when Scott went to lay down in bed that night, going from being vertical to horizontal, about halfway, something in his back went. And he was miserable, had trouble sleeping. I didn't sleep. So the next day, first thing, he got on the phone and found a chiropractor nearby. And he set a lunchtime appointment. So as soon as my session was done, well, actually on my way to the conference, and this was his idea, that I go to the conference. On my way down, I stopped at the front desk and asked, "Is there any chance you have a wheelchair?" And they said, "Yes, we have one in storage." Perfect. So get out of the banquet hall from the lecture, run up the stairs, grab the wheelchair, run through the lobby, go up the elevator, get him, wheelchair him out and down, and about a block and a half away, the place actually has a wheelchair lift, but it was broken. So he had to kind of hobble his way up the steps. I had to carry the wheelchair up the stairs, plop him in it, wheel him to the chiropractor. I think it was a 6-page piece of paperwork, and he and I both had to sign it, and it was all this in-depth stuff. He gets in to see the chiropractor. He comes out with pages of exercises and things to do. And I get him in the chair, and he was doing much better already at that point. Get him to the steps. He goes down the steps. I get him in the chair. I take him back to the hotel. We zoom through I think it was a Starbucks marketplace kind of thing where you could get sandwiches and fruit and that kind of thing, and you pay for it at the Starbucks counter. And then zoomed him upstairs. We scarfed the food as fast as I could, and I ran downstairs, and I was only 3 minutes late for the afternoon sessions. So it was a pretty good fit in terms of time, and if I'd skipped lunch, I could have made it, but that didn't seem right, and I didn't want to be the only one eating in the room, because we'd have our sessions in the front room, and then the lunches that they provided were in the room right behind. So I didn't want to have food on the table with other people there. So I was glad that I ate it upstairs. But I did learn quite a bit. I learned a bunch of stuff that I can bring home to the team. So that was really good. So then that whole day goes fine, and Scott and I just ordered in pizza into the room. And so we just stayed in, and the next day he was doing much better. So that night we went to an escape room with Carrie and her husband. Her husband happens to be a doctor, so I had asked, if I needed help getting him into the chair, into the car, something, would he help? And yeah, he would. So they were wonderful about it. Everybody was asking about him the whole rest of the conference, so it was so sweet. So we did an escape room, and Scott did wind up sitting on a folding chair for part of the time, but that was okay. It was our first escape room, and it was really kind of neat. They had our group of 4 and then another group of 4, and it was funny because there was like one person in both groups that had to be in charge. So we let them do that, and I did things like when they found puzzle pieces, I put them together, and by putting those together, you could see how to turn the heads on the lion door, which then opened an elevator over here. Well, the door to the elevator, then you had to figure out how to get the elevator doors to open, and then, it was this big thing. We knew, at least Scott and I knew, that we did not want to do what they wanted us to do, because it didn't smell right. And at the end we find out, yes, the bad guy has been in charge this whole time, ever since the signal got blocked from the first person we were talking to. And so, we were going to wind up being the perpetrators of this horrible thing unless we disarmed the nuclear missile. And so we did, of course. And with 6 minutes to spare, we were out. We'd won. Yay! So we did have a really good time. But the whole time Scott and I are like, we don't want to listen to this guy anyway, because we know that he's not on the up and up. But if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you don't get to have the fun. So there you go. But all in all, it was a lot of fun at the escape room. And we got back to the hotel, and then we left the next morning. So we had figured that if we had to, we could take an extra day, because we had driven up in 2 days. Because I didn't want to drive 13-hour days or 14-hour days, because that's how long it would have taken with taking breaks and things along the way. So we did 2 shorter days on the way up. But I was sitting there going, I have no idea how his back is going to react to bouncing around in a car for hours. And he actually did quite well. So we still did it in 2 days, which was very nice. Each time we went to the far side of Cleveland, which was about halfway, so we would skip any morning traffic, which was nice. So we got back at a reasonable time, and then he had a chance to recover a little bit. And then Monday he made an appointment for Tuesday with the chiropractor we have here. So he went yesterday, and now he's feeling almost back to normal. So whew, that's good. I definitely get into mother henny kind of mode when my baby's sick. So I tend to go a little bit overboard. So I was trying very hard not to, because I can smother him a little bit. But he's doing fine, and he's basically recovered, so we can both relax a little bit now. He went grocery shopping on Monday. Actually, no, he went grocery shopping. No, it was Monday. It was Monday. Laundry he didn't do until today, because he normally does grocery shopping on Monday and laundry on Tuesdays. But so he's still a little on the gimpy side, but he's almost back to normal. So I'm pretty happy about that. Okay. Other than that, I've been pretty busy. We've been trying to get figured out. That was not English at all. I'm sorry. We have been trying to figure out how I want to change the way I laid out my first book, the Hoarding for Law Enforcement's book, so that I can incorporate some of the same information into the new book, because it will be completely different audiences. The new book is Hoarding for Friends, hoarding, what the person who hoards their friends and family need to know. I'm not sure that's going to be the final title, but that's what it is right now. And so I've been, writing new outlines and trying to figure out new things. How much do I want to add? I figure the new book will probably be 3 times the size of the original one, because the first book was written with the idea that it could be a bathroom read, or an in-between calls or something like that, so that the officers can get the stuff in short little chunks or refer back to the chunk that they need when they need it. But this new one, I can be more explanatory, and I can also talk about things I didn't bother to talk about in the first book. For example, what to do if code compliance comes to your door, and how to work with them, etc. Because I'm writing this for the people who would be that person, so they understand what their local laws are and how they're going to act and all of that. So there's a lot to put into the new book. So we've been hemming and hawing about that and trying to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing with that. So downstairs in my office, I have a whiteboard. Well, it's on my right, but from your perspective, it would be over here. And it's just got lists and lists and lists and lists of things that I want to incorporate and how I want to do it. And there's mind maps up there, and there's all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of strange. Well, you all know I'm a little strange, but I'm strange in that I am both a list maker and a mind map maker. And most people tend to do better with one or the other, and that's what they stick to. Excuse me. I don't. I tend to mind map concepts and then put the lists in the concepts. So I have papers taped up on the whiteboard as well. So it's kind of frenetic if you weren't in on what I was doing, if you just came downstairs and you looked at that wall. So it's been kind of interesting trying to explain to Scott where my brain was going, because he does his best to keep up, but can't always. But anyway, so that's something I've been working on quite a bit since I've been home. I've also been doing some sewing back here, so I'm going to tip it up, because some of you have told me you like seeing the progress I'm making on this quilt. So I'm going to have to switch. I'm switching over here. It's not going to change for you, but since there's a delay between what I do with the camera and when you can see it, I need to switch to the other program here so that I can show you. Okay, so here's the top of the quilt, and I was here, I think, when I left to do the CIT conference, and then here when I left to do the ICD conference. So actually, I can also step out of the way a little bit here. Let me see if I can. Oh, there's my battery pack. Okay, so there's the top. So I've gotten quite a bit done here, and I've gotten this purple fish all in and lined up, which is kind of fun. And then this is what I did yesterday. So yes, these ones are missing, but that's because they are in one of my travel containers. And so as soon as they're done, they'll get put up on the wall. And then those triples will get renumbered. So you can see here's a triple where each piece has its number. When it's done being sewn, it'll be done with just one number in the middle. And all of these numbers are right side up. When I sewed some of these, the numbers were cattywampus like here because there were seams and things involved. So there's that. Let me get the chair out of the way. And then just so you can see where the bottom is, here we go. That's the bottom of the quilt. So it's coming along quite well, I think. These are just random ones that I've gotten at various different times finished. So they're going to be ready to just integrate in, because these have all been sewn into at least triples. So that's our status on that. Alright, let me come back. I'll try to get lined up again so that I make sense. And hopefully I didn't make anybody seasick. Okay, so I did get a chance to work on this stuff here in the last couple of days. On average, I would say I get about 4 to 5 triples done per day, which doesn't sound like much. I admit that. But that's because it's usually at the end of the night, I'm watching TV with Scott, or, you know, I take a couple of days off from it because I have other things to do, and then I have a day that's bigger. So I'd say it's 4 to 5 a day. Now, there's over 1,500 hexagons in this quilt. So there's going to be 6 times that number of little 1-inch seams. Now it's a little less than that because on this edge there's fewer, and on this edge there's no, there's still 3 on this edge. So on this side there's 1 less. Okay, but it's also more than 1,500 seams. So that's a lot of seams to do. So if I do 5 5 triples, that's 15 1-inch seams with all the hand sewing, with all the knotting off and everything else. It adds up. So that's one reason why this is going to be an incredibly long-term project. But that's okay. That's what it's designed for. The short-term stuff, like the Twisted 4-patch quilt that's open, these are in a different order than they were before. The Twisted 4-patch used to be right here. But I took down the design walls because I'm taking part in a charm block challenge and swap. So I needed to take all of my boards down and pick fabrics that I would cut up for the challenge. And we can talk about that in a second. And so when I put the boards back, I just put them back in a way that made sense that you guys could see this stuff a little bit better. And so my Twisted 4-patch is over here. Now, the Twisted 4-patch has not moved forward since the last time we spoke. The back is done. The front is done. I have not actually gotten my quilt sandwich made because I wanted to use a spray base, and it has been pouring rain out, and I prefer to spray it and let it set up a little bit, and then I put it down, and it's a little bit easier for me to work. It's not that way for everybody, but it is for me. So I want it to have that chance to set up. And you can't do that in 100% humidity. And it has just either been ready to rain or raining for days. So thank you, Ian. So I haven't had a chance to advance that. Plus, for those of you who have stuck around for a while, my relationship with technology is a very bad one. It is definitely a hate-hate. And so right after my last live stream, and just before I left for Chicago, my monitor died. And it died in a really weird way, to the point where my husband said to me, because it wouldn't actually come up. Um, he looked at me and he said, I have never heard a piece of electronics make that kind of noise before. It was making these really weird alien sounds, and it just would not come up. So that meant we had to switch it all out and everything else, and then of course we were gone. So I now have a new monitor, well, not new, from a different part of the house, but new for this studio, sitting here. But the holes on the back are bigger, wider than the holes on the old monitor, so the screws don't actually attach. They just slide in and out, like a penny whistle. So that's not going to do any good for my swing arm. And I like my monitor on the swing arm so that I can pass my quilt over the tabletop and not have it running into the base of the monitor and getting all hung up. So there's a couple reasons why that 4-patch is going to sit there until I can get this mounted and can actually get things ready to go. So that may sit around for another couple of weeks. And my son borrowed my swing arm for the camera that sits up here so that you can see what I'm sewing. And he returned it to me and he left it on my desktop. And he's at work, so I could not get him to fix this today. So, it is what it is. And that brings me to another comment. I had a client say to me, that her situation was just so horrible and she was so embarrassed, and it's, she's such a bad person, and all of these kinds of negative self-talk stuff that she was doing. And I was like, sometimes you just have to say, things change. You never used to be like that. You're like this now. You might go back. You might not. It's fine. It's out of your control anyway. Just let it go, and let's move you forward to where you want to be. And that can be really hard for people. I am not always as good as I would like to be, so one of the things that I'm working on myself is to accept the fact that stuff happens. Okay? You're going to miss the flight. You're going to have a flat tire. You're going to have somebody die. And it's all part of the way the world and the universe works. And sometimes you have to say, okay, it happened. Now, how do I move forward from here? I tend to be a little bit of a wallower. And so I don't want to be like that. I've been working on this for years. I've gotten much better over time. But yeah, I used to have a very regular pity party at my house, and I provided the ice cream and chips. So it can be really hard to do that. And I've had some people who have told me that about things like quilts that they're making. And they'll say, oh, it was so hard, and I messed it up, and I'm just going to stop this whole quilting thing altogether because I'm just not any good at it. No. Stuff happens. Okay, you messed up. Figure out how you messed up and then either fix it or say, you know what? This one block is going to be different. It's okay. I'll try to do the rest the other way. And if I have the oomph left and I want to do another one to replace this one, then this can be my label on the back. Or it can go into an orphan quilt. What's been funny is that I had this happen to me once, and I was just stomping around my studio. And just dang a frang a dickle lickle lick a mickey kind of attitude. And then I said, you know what? I'm putting this away. I'm going to look at it tomorrow and decide what I want to do with it then. Because what I had done is I had inverted a couple of pieces in this block, so it was completely the wrong block. And I was tired, and I was hangry, and I said, okay, I'm just going to go downstairs. I'm taking the night off from this stupid hobby I have. And so I went downstairs and we watched something stupid on TV. And I walked in the next morning and I said, okay, what have I got? Is it worth dismantling this block to fix it? And then I said, okay, let's do something different. Let's try to change the perspective. Kind of like I was talking about at the beginning with going to 2 dimensions is actually a change of perspective. And I said, okay, let me go and get a couple of mirrors that I have. And I said, okay, let's see how obvious this would be. And when I put in the mirrors, I was like, you know what? This is the best stupid mistake I think I've ever made. My mess up was actually better than the original. It was a challenge thing. So I wasn't even, it was the kind of thing I wasn't really invested in the first place. I was just doing it because I should be doing it. The new block was so much cooler. And the secondary patterns that putting it next to another mistake block made, it was so cute. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to keep making this mistake. So I took the pattern and I stuck a sticky note over that part of the assembly directions, and I said, look at the original. And so I did this quilt. I wound up giving this one away. And it was so darn cute. And it would have been fine the original way. I think it would have been fine. But the new one had a lot more zip. And I was like, you know, this is really cool. So in this particular case, my mess up became the ultimate design. But all my negative self-talk and my feeling angry and frustrated and all of that just took my situation and made it feel worse. It didn't improve a darn thing, right? So that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here, and I realized that was how I handled a lot of things. Is that I would just get mad, and if somebody else had messed it up, I would have been so sympathetic, and I would have been so supportive. But I wasn't doing that for myself. So something that I'm working on is trying to have a little bit more faith and compassion in myself, and to cut myself some slack. You know, if I don't get everything on my list done for either Conquer the Clutter, which is my organizing company, or for StashBlaster Quilts for you guys will understand. I've had some of you who've written me and said, yeah, it seems like you had a really bad week. It's going to be a much better week this week. You get it. It's so much easier to see for other people. But feeling it and accepting it for yourself does make life a lot better. So do I still mess up? Yes. I told you that on this channel, if you watch one of my earlier videos, you're going to watch all my mistakes. Okay? But you're also going to see how we can think our way out of it. Or maybe I'll just decide to accept it and call it a design decision. There's no reason that it can't be. Now, actually, there are reasons. If you're trying to do one of those quilts with the teeny little pieces where it looks like a real person, you know, from a distance, or a real pet or something, then no, you don't want the nose doing this up on there. That would be bad in terms of your design. You can't just say that this is a design decision unless you say, okay, I've messed up the nose, let's mess up the rest of it and call it a Picasso picture of Bruno. Which is also a different design decision, but that would be a design decision. There are things you can do to help avoid those mistakes, like all of these stupid numbers here. Because I know me. I would drop the bucket full of hexes and lose track of what went with what if they weren't actually numbered. But you know what? I'm not doing them in exact order. these ones are missing. And I'm not going to freak out about it. If they're still missing when all of the hexes have been turned into triads, I'm not going to be real happy. And I'll be hunting my whole house to try to find them. But I'm taking what steps I can to avoid the mistakes. But they're going to happen. They're going to happen. Another thing I've been trying to do to avoid the mistakes is that when I've sewn up a small stack of triples downstairs, and every time I sew it, it goes back in the box. Okay, I don't leave any on any surfaces, and when I bring them up, I immediately put them on the wall. Because I know if I set them on my sewing surface, they're going to get stuck to a piece of fabric, and they're going to be who knows where, maybe even sewn into something, and then I'm in real trouble. And then I have to make all new hexes, and then I have to undo the hexes when I finally get back to that thing. So I am doing what I can to avoid mistakes, but I'm also saying that's okay if it happens. Okay? So, like the Twisted 4 patch. A couple of you have talked to me about it, and at least one person told me that they voted for it because they thought it was going to look cool, and now that they've seen it, they don't like it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You can sew a quilt and then decide at the end you don't like it. That means you don't keep it. You give it away. And that could be as a gift to someone that you know and love. It could be to a charity. You could put it someplace where they're going to raffle it for money to support some cause that you like. Or you can put it in a giant bulk donation box like I have in my other room. And when something like Ian hits, you send 6 boxes down to Florida, which I did this last week. So, you know, that's one of those things where I don't always have the cash on hand to send for things like that. But if over the course of a year I've sewn a couple of 100 quilts, then sure, I'll send them. You know? And while a lot of the quilts that I sew are the ones that I've designed to sew together very quickly, it doesn't mean that some other quilt that I made along the way that I don't like can't be one of them. Right? So give it a shot. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're not going to like it? You're going to tear it out 3 times attempting to make it look right? Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's the pattern is written badly. I've had people where I've made the pattern, I've sent it to somebody to test it, they tested it, it came back fine, I sent it to somebody else, it came back fine, and then I put it out into the world, and somebody wrote to me and said there's this problem, and darn it, they were right. So I went ahead and I corrected it, and I put up the new version on the website, and then the people that I knew that owned the pattern, and there were a couple, I sent them a note that said, okay, we've got this problem, I just found out about it, please correct it. But that's because I happen to know who they were. There's no way otherwise. But it's one of those things where these things are going to happen. You can't keep beating yourself up about it. So that's one of my goals for this year. We're 10 months into this year. This was not a New Year's resolution. I started this, I think, June 2 years ago. 2020. Yeah, because May is when COVID hit, and I started off making masks, and I made tons of masks. I made 3,600 masks. And I didn't enjoy any of it, but I did it because people needed them. And then at one point I'm like, I am beating myself up because I'm not meeting my own self-imposed quota for masks. How stupid is that? Nobody's paying me to make these masks. Nobody's waiting for them desperately because, somebody's going to die on an operating table if I can't give them this mask. Because, of course, they're not going to use those in an operating theater anyway, but you know what I mean. And, I am being so mean to myself here. And there's not a real good reason for it. And then I realized that's because I'm always mean to myself. And that's when I started this whole okay, I've got to learn to just let it go. And so when something great comes my way, that's great, but it's not going to last. So thank you. But, I'm not getting myself all hyped up on the, am I going to win this? Am I going to win that? Did I get the prize? Because it really, in the long run, doesn't matter. And if you find yourself having a hard time thinking through things like that, think about what would happen if you had been or were in Florida when Ian hit, and everything you own is gone. This is not going to change who you are as a person, right? If you are petty and vindictive, you're still going to be petty and vindictive. If you're the kind of person who buckles down and works, you're going to buckle down and work. If you're the kind that sits there and just stomps and swears and just frustrates yourself, then you're going to stomp and swear and be frustrated. But really, only the one in the middle is going to be improving their situation. And it's a little bit fatalistic, but it's also a little realistic. We're all going to have these times. And if we can just be kind to ourselves and not let this desire that we have to not only be perfect, but in how others see us, but in how we see ourselves. If we can't cut ourselves any slack, then we're just making everybody around us miserable too. Since I've been trying to do this, I think that the people around me are in better moods. Because when I'm in that stumpy, snippy kind of mood, nobody wants to be around me because they don't want to have to feel the backwash of all of that. Whereas if I can just say, you know what, this is happening, let's see what we can do to fix it, and if it's not today, it'll be another day. Deep breath, let it go, move on. It's better. It's better for everybody. My body is breaking down where I'm not going to be able to be working in the field with clients, organizing as much anymore. I just can't carry 15-pound boxes all day anymore. So I'm stepping back from that, which means I have more time at home. And I don't have an assistant right now, so I'm still slammed there, plus the book, plus presentations, plus everything else that I'm doing. But I don't want my being home to be something that my husband and son are dreading because I'm in such a bad mood all the time. So that's another reason that I'm working on this. If you have something like that you're working on, either attitudinally or something that frustrates you that you want to share, this environment, I'm hoping, will be the kind of place where you can share that you're frustrated or that you're feeling snippy today or whatever, and the people that are here will understand and will support you. Know that I will. I tend to be incredibly non-judgmental about everybody but me. That's why I'm working on that. This channel did not take off like a rocket ship, and I don't have 100,000 subscribers or anything. There's been 14 of you for months, and that's fine. If I'm helping anybody, that's really the goal. Or even if somebody wants to listen to me so that they can laugh at me, that's fine too. I know that I'm a little weird. And I think that those of us that are a little weird need to be a little more obvious about it. Be who we are, accept who we are, and be unrelentingly, honestly ourselves. I will admit that I do break that sometimes at clients because although I want to wrinkle up my nose at the smell, I don't. That's a little bit not being 100% unrelenting myself. But, if I'm frustrated, I can tell myself, you're frustrated, and that's okay. Let's move forward in some way. Maybe I'll say, okay, this project, I'm missing something. That's what's got me frustrated. I'm missing something. Okay, do something else and come back to it when you're fresh and not frustrated. That's okay. I used to be the type, though, that would be like, no, if it's frustrating, it's because I'm missing something, which means there's something wrong with me and I need to fix it. And so I'm going to keep pounding my head on this wall until I get an answer. But all that's going to do is give me a bloody forehead, right? I'm getting better at saying, that's okay. Do something else. You can always come back to it. You can also decide to just chuck it. So, I know this isn't what this channel is all about. This is a quilting thing. But I hear so many people tell me that they're so frustrated when they're doing patterns. Or all the negative self-talk either by clients or I've gotten some of it from some of you. And I know that it's something that I need to work on, and I wanted to share it so that you know you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there that don't have it all put together. You know, there were women that I was so envious of when my son was small, because they were, you know, on the PTA and they were doing this and they were doing that, and their houses were expensive and perfect, and their children always seemed to be polite and well behaved and all that, which my son was for everybody but us. Okay, at home he was a completely different person than he was when he went to somebody else's house. And so I was like, I am such a horrible parent. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm obviously doing something wrong because my child isn't like that. And so there was this one woman in particular that I knew that I thought had this just nailed down. She knew what she was doing. She was like the goal of how I should be. And then she hired my company. And I walked into this house and my heart sank, because this was a situation of hoarding and it was pretty bad. And so she had this perfect outside facade, but in her own head, she had some real problems. And so one of the first things that we did was we said, okay, you can't stay in this house. You need to move to a hotel, the entire family, and I will come and keep checking the hotel to make sure that it's in good condition. But we need to move you out of here so that we can work safely in this home, we can get it repaired, and we can make it so that everything's good. And she said, well, why should we bother? You know, we've been living here all this time. Why should we do that? And I said, well, because if anyone finds out the situation that your children are in, they're going to pull your kids and ship them across the state. Now, that sounds like a weird threat. So if you're watching this and you're not where I live, which is Northern Virginia, you won't understand why I'm saying it this way. Here in Northern Virginia, housing prices are so high because we're right near DC. So we have a lot of high-powered business people, politicians. There's also military bases around here. Lots and lots of people with really expensive property. And so people don't tend to have a lot more house than what they're using. Or they tend to not be the kind of people who will accept other people into their homes, to be honest with you. So most of the children from this area, in order to have foster care, have to go to less expensive areas where people will have an extra bedroom or two so that they can house foster children. So I had a client whose kids were pulled by Child Protective before I was ever involved in the job, and the kids were 4.5 hours away, one-way drive. So I said, we need to do this because this house is not safe for your children to be in, and if Child Protective ever finds out, those kids are going to be gone. And it's going to take you a lot to get them back. Let's move you all to a safe environment where if Child Protective shows up at the hotel, you'll be fine. And then we can work on getting the house the way it needs to be. And that's what we did. And it took 2.5 years for her to get past all of her demons. And this was true hoarding disorder, so she had to be in therapy, and we had to do all kinds of things to get it to where it was a clean, sanitary, safe home, and they could all move back in. The advantage to keeping them together was that they were there to support each other. And the kids could still go to the same school with their friends and all of that. They never had friends over to their home anyway, of course, because they didn't want to have any issues or be called names or anything like that. So that didn't change until they moved back in later. But they still saw their friends and could still be on the same teams and all of that. And so it made a huge difference. And I realized that just because what I'm seeing on the outside is not necessarily what's happening on the inside. And in her head, she was incredibly self-critical. And so she was spending all of her time doing her best to shut out her own inner voices that were telling her how bad she was. And she was just constantly beating herself up. And so I realized that my house isn't perfect on the outside or the inside, to be honest with you. But that's okay, because the way it is fine for me and my family. No, I don't live in a perfect house. People think that I must because I'm a professional organizer. No, I'm also a quilter and crafter and all of that. So yeah, this whole room is full of stuff. It's fairly well organized, but I also have a garage that's got tools and stuff down there and, bins and things like that. Yes, I don't live in a minimalist world. I don't want to. But I also don't have to. Okay? My home is safe. It is clean. I can use all the rooms as intended. And it's a happy home. And really, that's the most important part. So I know that this has been a kind of a weird conversation tonight. That's kind of what you get at these live streams. You get up front, you get the tip. It's not tip of the week, but tip of the stream, I guess. The headwater of the stream. And then I update you on the stuff that we're doing, either together, like the Twisted 4 patch, or this hexy quilt behind me, or anything else I'm doing quilting related, or where I've been and what I've done. And it's a little bit of a stream of consciousness, this part of the live stream. So I do have some people that show up for the tip and then they leave, and that's fine. So if you've enjoyed yourself, please like, subscribe, etc. If you hit the bell, you'll get a notification that I'm up. I am 7 o'clock, the first and third Wednesday of each month. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Please know that although I don't know who all of you are, I know who some of you are. You are always welcome to email me, mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and send me any questions that you have about quilting or organizing or anything like that. Give me comments on how to improve this. I'm happy to take your suggestions. And know that you're not alone. I am on your side. I'm always on your side. So if you ever get a feeling like you're just stuck and there's nobody who gets it, believe me, I've had a very messy life over the years. Not all physically. A lot of it's been drama. But you are not alone. And you are welcome here. Anytime. First and third Wednesdays, it's live. 7 to 8 o'clock. And I do try to respect your time. So it is just now about to turn 8 o'clock. So have a wonderful night, everyone. Or whenever you see this, I will see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.